confidence drops. Yeah? So encourage learners to use the language which they know. Praise them if they're communicating effectively with you. Don't worry about mistakes. We all make mistakes. Yeah? Obviously there are times when you do need to focus on mistakes, but if your goal is to increase the self-confidence, then you shouldn't focus on mistakes. And if the teacher is not telling Ali about the mistakes, that student is going to be more motivated. Yeah? Because their confidence will have been raised. Make language classes interesting. Sounds obvious, doesn't it? Of course we need to make language classes interesting, and of course it's not always possible, but we should do whatever we can to make language classes interesting. This is an example from the Think book I showed you earlier, which has a photo story about young people and going out at the weekend. So making things interesting for students, thinking about topic is a great motivator. The fifth one, very, 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 very important. Promote learner autonomy. Give me a synonym for autonomy. Power. Independence. Yeah. How can we do this? How can we promote learner autonomy? What do we need to do? Yes, sir.
Give less guidance for the students. Let them work on their own.
Okay. Letting them work on their own and?
Give the students their own space.
Okay, great, good. And reducing what?
Instruct them on their level.
Okay, very good. Come back to level again. And? Sorry? Right, give the students the role of the teacher. Yeah? Make it child-centered, make it learner-centered, and less teacher-centered. Very often teachers are frightened of this because they think they're losing control of what's going on in the classroom. But of course, if you're holding tight control, students are never going to become independent learners. They're never going to get very far. So we need to promote learner autonomy. We need to personalize the learning process. If you're going to get students to write, get them to write about my life in the future. Not John and Mary in the future, but me, my life. Write about your life in the future. We need to increase goal orientation. And this means what? Yeah. I'll give you half a mark. Increase goal orientation. Right. Yeah. Making them aware of what they're doing and why they're actually doing it. And many course books nowadays, they give you the objectives. Yeah, they're not giving you the objectives, they're giving the students the objectives. So easy language, talking about future events, future continuous, future perfect, money and value, jobs and work and so on. So the students know what they're doing and why they're actually doing it. If your teacher tells you you're doing this because, that's why we're doing it. But if the teacher says, open the book and do this, which we often do, students are thinking, why? Why am I doing this? Yeah, and that's going to decrease motivation. Familiarise learners with the target culture. Now, there's a lot of arguments about this, but language and culture are married, aren't they? They're engaged. Yeah, you can't separate language from culture. That doesn't mean that students have to know everything about culture, but they have to recognise that there are certain things in culture which have an impact on language. Yeah? It has to do with degrees of formality level, for example, and how we respond and how we do things. So students have to be familiar up to a point with the target culture. The ninth one, making the classroom a relaxed place in which to learn. If a classroom is stressful, students are not going to be motivated. There's going to be fear all the time in the language classroom. So the last one is what? Present tasks clearly. Present tasks clearly. Now, maybe some of you are sitting here thinking, yes, it's all okay in theory, but now give us some activities. I'm not going to give you any activities because It depends on you and it depends on your students, how your students are actually going to be motivated. But these broad strategies are very, very important. Keep these in mind and apply them to your particular context. So, there's no quick and easy solution to motivating your students, particularly if we're talking about teenagers. Because on Monday morning, they're up and they're ready and they're happy and they're having fun. Tuesday morning, they're completely different. Yeah? Completely the opposite. So remember, students will change day by day in how motivated they actually are. Remember also, every teaching context is different, every learning context is different. What works for you here in Amman doesn't work in Cairo, and what works in Cairo doesn't work in Paris, and so on and so forth. So every situation is going to be different, every classroom is different, every group of students is different. And our job, of course, is to adapt to the different contexts. The key to all of this, of course, is knowing your students, and we'll come to this in the third and final workshop in just a minute. So the final advice, I said there would be some final advice, and there are 10 little tips, I guess, about motivating and engaging your students. The first one, of course, engage your students. I'm not going to ask you how, you know how to do that, and as I've said, it's going to be different for every situation that you're in. Secondly, and a couple of you have said this already, make your students curious. Yeah? And curious means what? Yeah, they're interested, they want to know, because this is something new, it's something that I don't know. I'm actually writing a new edition of one of my books at the moment, and the unit is about holidays and free time, and I'm thinking, what on earth can I do which will interest the students about holidays? I mean, what are we going to do about holidays? Yeah, so I went to, that wonderful person, Mr. Google, or maybe it's Mrs. Google, and I typed in weird and wonderful holidays, and you'd be amazed at the stuff that came up. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really interesting. So I've got some nice ideas now for weird and wonderful holidays, rather than beach holiday, sightseeing holiday, and boring holidays. So make the students curious. Thirdly, challenge them. Challenge them doesn't mean fail them. Challenge them doesn't mean make it so difficult that they're going to drown. Challenge them means make sure it's at their level and a little bit more difficult. Yeah? So they may not get 10 out of 10, but they'll get 8 or they'll get 9 out of 10, and not 2 out of 10. So challenge is the key element. Fourthly, and we sometimes forget this, because teachers, we tend to look for what students can't do rather than what they can do. So my fourth point is, find out what your students are good at. Find out what your students can do. Because if you know what they can do, what can you do?
Motivate them.
You can motivate them. You can build on what they can do. If we're constantly underlining it with a red pen and slapping them for what they can't do, then we're not going to be motivating our students. So find out what your students are good at, even your low achievers, and build on that information. In other words, shut up. Teachers love talking, don't we? We love talking about ourselves, our experiences, our lives, what we've done, what we haven't done, what we like, what we don't like. But if we shut up, it will give students an opportunity to tell us things. Yeah? A few more to do. Give them responsibility. And a couple of you have mentioned this. You said give students roles. It's very important for students to have roles, particularly if you're doing group work in the classroom. Yeah? But just giving a low achiever, for example, a particular role, that will boost their confidence and boost their motivation. Again, teachers are often frightened of this because you think, if I give my students responsibility, I've lost control. Well, that's not true, because the responsibility comes from you, not from the students. What do you think I mean by number 7?
Shake them up.
Shake them up.
Challenge them.
Well, that's number 3.
Let them enjoy the
Sorry?
Let them move and be active.
Yeah, it's part of that. I'll give you half a mark. Yes, certainly make them think. Yeah, that's probably number 3 as well.
Show them that there is
them to know. So they have to do
Okay.
wake them up.
Yeah, it's not quite what I'm thinking of.
Showing the topic from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think it's doing things in a different way.
Inspiring them.
Sorry?
Inspiring.
Certainly inspiring them, yeah. But I think the idea here is do things differently. We tend to do things in a routine sort of way. Yeah.
Let them enjoy the class.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely enjoyment is key. But you know, why not come in one day with a plastic bag on your head? For example, silly example. Yeah, but do things differently. Instead of having the same routine every day, do things a bit different, and students will think, oh, this is different. And immediately you've got them, you've engaged them. A couple of you have also mentioned this point about getting students to use their imagination, allowing them freedom of expression. Don't stop students from expressing themselves. It doesn't matter if they have crazy ideas. It's much better to have a crazy idea than to have no ideas at all.
They will not stop.
That's fine. That's fine if they don't
I'm
stop.
gonna give them a
It's fine. Number 9. You're going to like this one, I think. Yeah, everybody likes number 9. But the point I'm trying to make here is if you as a teacher feel that you're working very hard in the classroom, something's going wrong, isn't it? Because the ones who should be working hard in the classroom, it's not the teacher, it should be the students. So if you're doing all the hard work, it means they're probably doing nothing. And they're doing nothing because they're not engaged, it's too difficult, they don't understand, etc, etc, etc. So if you are finding that you're doing lots of stuff, then probably the students are not doing anything for them. And the last point, turn your classroom into a spider's web. Which means what?
Have them move around and communicate with other groups.
Okay, okay. And who's in the middle of the spider's web? The teacher is the spider. Yeah? And a spider is constantly building and moving and manipulating, yeah? But everything is connected. Everything is connected in the classroom. And that doesn't just mean the people, it also means your resources, the classroom walls, everything should all be connected. Just think about your next class. Have you got your... You don't have to answer, but do answer in your head. If they're all sitting in rows, you haven't got a spider's web. I don't know what we would call it, but it's certainly not a spider's web. You haven't got connections between people. Yeah? You need to get students connected by thinking about the groupings and the management. So, I haven't done any activities with you really, which show you about motivation. What I have done, I hope, is give you advice and given you some strategies. And these are very, very broad, but they can be applied to any particular situation. So, any questions? Anything anybody wants to ask? Yeah. Okay, the gentleman is saying, should we be engaging individual students or should we be engaging the students as a group? Can I defer my answer for the next workshop? Because the answer is in the next workshop. Yeah? Any other questions? Okay, just take time out for 30 seconds. You probably want to check your phones if you haven't already. gents, let's do our final workshop and then it'll be lunchtime. So, we're going to have a look at differentiation and what it means, and we'll look at what a multi-level class is, and we're going to do a free writing activity. We'll have a look at how we can actually differentiate, and I'm going to show you how if we focus on content, process and product, we can differentiate in the classroom, we can grade tasks for different types of learners. So, what is a mixed ability class? When you hear the term mixed ability, what do you think of? Yes, madam?
I think that the class is divided into the first one is the high, then the average,
Yeah. Okay. So the lady there is saying that a class is typically divided into 3 groups. We have most of the students in the middle, then we have our high achievers and we have our low achievers. So the lady here is thinking about academic differences. Yeah? Okay, great. Yeah, Anne.